Dr. McIntosh think dinosaurs had feathers and could they have evolved into birds? Thanks.
I don't think I don't. I think the answer is no. But let me just say there are some creationists, I won't name them, who try to argue that dinosaurs need to be redefined as a group of creatures which are defined entirely by, defined by other characteristics other than just feathers. Sorry, I beg your pardon, I put that badly. That dinosaurs are defined as creatures which are not just in terms of things that we normally think of. The public perception of dinosaurs, and I much prefer this definition, is of cold-blooded creatures, that is, reptiles, because there's all the evidence is that they had scales, a bit like crocodiles today, and that they laid eggs just like crocodiles do today, because we've got plenty of examples of dinosaur fossilized eggs, fossilized dinosaur eggs. So my view of the term dinosaur is that they are essentially extinct reptiles, similar not in direct morphology, but similar in principle to crocodiles and other reptiles. Okay.
Can I just ask you quickly, Andy, because we've talked about feathered dinosaurs on Creation Conversations before, and obviously John and I can talk from a fossil-y perspective.
Of course you can, yeah.
But what I want to ask you is, from a
I was coming to it, but I need to define my terms.
Sorry, go for it. Yeah. I was just
so I'm sorry if I was a bit long-winded.
That's right.
It's just that I know you can do that, and you'll do it far better than me. But if you keep to a definition of the word dinosaur as a cold-blooded reptile, right, which in my view is what the common understanding is of a dinosaur, right, then there's no way you could have had feathered dinosaurs because of my own discipline, which is aerodynamics and thermodynamics, okay? Because as soon as you put feathers on, right, you actually stop the heat getting in to the creature, which is fine for a bird, which has warm-blooded, like we are warm-blooded. It's not the same system, but it's a warm-blooded creature. If you've got a cold-blooded creature like a dinosaur, it needs to warm up in the sunshine, okay? It doesn't get going until it's got hot during the middle of the morning, They're dozy creatures in the beginning of the day, and then they get their energy and they pounce and do all that they do as predators. So I think it's a complete misnomer to talk about feathered dinosaurs because you're putting feathers onto a cold-blooded creature. Feathers, I would suggest that anything with feathers is a distinctive of birds. So we do find some feathered creatures which we don't have today. Archaeopteryx is an example, right? And I do think that some of the findings in China do distinctly look like birds because they've got all the features of what I would say you would expect a bird to have, but they've got extra features. Archaeopteryx has got a bony tail. Birds don't have bony tails today. They've got teeth, and most birds don't have teeth. But that just simply means that there was a much wider group of birds in the past which had bony tails and teeth, but they weren't dinosaurs. There's no way that you could have had a cold-blooded creature having feathers. That's my view as an engineer with an expertise in thermodynamics and indeed aerodynamics, looking at this whole issue of so-called feathered dinosaurs. I don't believe that any of the creatures should be called feathered dinosaurs. Any of the
if I can just launch something on the back of that, because here in Australia, we just opened our new museum 2 weeks ago, and we were totally overbooked. So our main display is on dinosaurs, the history of the monsters God made. It makes that point that you're making, and we even have a whole wall on the feathered dinosaur fraud. But the reason I want to remind people about this is people have asked, when are we going to open it again? Because that was a trial run. We are, for those people who missed out, and anybody else who wants to come next Saturday, the 19th here, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, that museum here in Brisbane, next to Archerfield Airport, will be open again. So for those of you who are awake and listening here in Australia, if you want to be part of that dinosaur tour and look at the evidence like Andy's talking about, then you must get in touch with us at info@creationresearch.net and let us know you're coming, because we'll be inviting our people who want to learn how to guide people through the museum on that day as well. So that's Saturday, the 19th of August, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And thank you, Andy, for that great definition there. That's really helpful.
And if I can just add a very brief thing to the end of that about a personal experience that I've had regarding feathered dinosaurs, right? Because Andy has mentioned some of these dinosaurs, particularly the ones coming from China, or things that are purported to be dinosaurs coming from China, which look like they have feathers in them. But then you'll go to the Natural History Museum in London and you'll see velociraptor models which are covered in feathers, right? And you ask, well, how much evidence do we have of velociraptors having feathers? And the answer is very little, really. We've never found a single feather next to a velociraptor. And so what you'll then find is that we went to go and source because we want to talk about the life size, right, of a velociraptor, which is much, much smaller than the general public perception. It's sourced from an associate of mine, an acquaintance of mine, who's worked with museums around the world. He is an expert in casting dinosaurs, right? And he had made a brilliant cast of a velociraptor in the drowning pose, right? Brilliant cast. And we ordered one, got it sent to Australia. It turns out that it was one of the new casts that he'd done most recently, and it is covered in feathers, fossil feathers. And I said to him, well, where are these fossil feathered, velociraptor casts coming from? He said, oh, we don't find any ones with fossil feathers on them, but it's what the museums want nowadays, so we add them in.
So now, you can come along on August the 19th and actually see that here in Australia.
Now that's intellectual dishonesty, at its greatest. This is what museums want. It's no different, and we could go on and talk about all these kind of things. It's no different from when they show you a lovely model of Lucy in the museums when she's upright, walking with whites in her eyes, given the appearance of being a subhuman kind of creature. So really, there's very little evidence for feathers on dinosaurs at all, as we've discussed.
Just two people that I just mentioned. I'm not going to mention the people who are pushing a view which I don't accept, because I don't want to blacken they sincerely disagree with us, but I'm not going to mention their names. But I will mention those who agree with us, as well as John and Joe here, obviously, but and Craig, but and Diane, of course. But the two people I'd just like to mention, Joel Tay has written on this, and I can't remember where the publications are, but if you look up his name, he's a person who believes in creation, and he has actually produced, I think it's in the Answers Research Journal, or it may be the Technical Journal, one of those. He's written on this whole issue from the perspective you've just been saying. And interestingly, a person who is much maligned in the evolutionary world has actually stood up against the feathered dinosaur idea. He's not a Christian. His name is Alan Fiducia. And he's got a whole suite of people working with him. And he has been corresponding with some other people who've actually know full well that Alan is taking some stick for what he maintains, because people are trying to malign him, but he's actually done his homework very carefully. And it's worth reading what Alan actually says, even though he doesn't accept the creationist position, doesn't accept the age of the earth that we would take, doesn't accept the flood. But he says, no way does the evidence justify the idea of feathered dinosaurs.
I know that one of the dinosaurs that's is heavily pushed from evolutionists currently at the minute is Sinosauropteryx.
Yes.
That has that's supposedly covered with feathers, that's clearly preserved. Does that have any modicum of truth to that?
Well, from my perspective, very briefly, they don't look a thing like feathers, and
No.
They're
That's what I was
probably,
gonna say.
Diane's the best person to comment on because they are most likely decaying collagen fibers.
Yes.
We have very, very good fossil feathers preserved in the fossil record, and they don't look anything like that. So it's basically as simple
They're
as that.
not pernicious feathers, we call them, Craig. And
No,
those
they're
who
not.
are listening to me or looking at this program, that means they're not feathers which could bear weight. They're not flight feathers. They're nothing like it. They're just bits of bits of ligament, some people have said, maybe collagen fibers, as Joseph has said. They're nothing like anything to do with real feathers.